Ever since March, I've been itching to tell you about something very special happening next year that I'm particularly excited about. But now I'm proud to finally announce that Joe Cornish and I will be presenting a woodland photography event and 8-week-long exhibition here in the North York Moors National Park. As well as exhibiting a carefully curated selection of prints from our favourite local woodlands, we'll also have guest presentations, in-conversation events, exhibition tours, woodland walks, activities for families and more. For those of you who aren't familiar with Joe, well, he's a household name in landscape photography with an esteemed career spanning over 4 decades. I have a huge amount of admiration and respect for his craftsmanship, his expertise, and how he talks so eloquently about the art of photography. I'm thrilled to be running this event with Joe, and I'm sure it'll be a memorable highlight in my own career. So please stay tuned for some more information and dates, but for now, let's have a chat with Joe and talk about why are we doing this, the benefits of printing and exhibiting, and what we hope to achieve both personally and for the wider community.
I've been photographing trees and woods a lot the last 5 years. My love of the trees goes back to childhood, and so in fact the few original paintings and drawings I have left from being a kid are of trees and wood. So I think it's very kind of deeply buried, and it seems strange that in the period first sort of 30 odd years of my career, I was mainly concentrating on what you might call travel and landscape, and so it was probably more vista type photography predominated, and also film is really hard to make good pictures of trees on film because of the contrast. So this has been a kind of rediscovery for me personally, working on trees and woods, and that's been a real joy. And you know, you have also been a source of inspiration, I'd say, in that regard.
Oh,
so
thank you. Well, you'd been enough of an inspiration to me for quite a few years before I discovered Woodland. So for me, it's a thrill to be collaborating on this. You know, I can't wait to just see the images hanging on the wall. But I've had very limited experience in terms of exhibiting. I had one small, very personal one-day exhibition, which was in 2018, but I found it an incredibly fulfilling process, and I learned a huge amount from the printing process and actually just talking to people who were viewing the photographs. But you've been used to exhibiting for many years. What do you think the benefits are to any photographer to go through the process of curating a cohesive body of work, printing those and displaying them in a meaningful way on the wall?
It's quite difficult to say it without sounding pompous, because you know, in a way, you could say a lot of photographers get great joy and satisfaction from showing their work digitally on the internet, where thousands of people can see it. But it is different than making a print. Making a print is for me is much more immersive. And actually, if I make a photograph that I love, I just can't. I can wait, but I can't wait that long to print it. And the print is for me the fulfillment of it. And also there's a kind of it's a big extra step creatively making the print. You have to commit to the color and the texture and the tone and the luminance. Once you exhibit it, you're saying that you're really trying to say this is where I am with this idea, this photograph. It's artistry. Is kind of, I'm trying to express my artistry in that moment. It does sound pompous, doesn't it? But anyway, it's kind of it's very fulfilling, and obviously it's a financial commitment as well. You've got to, you know, spend a bit of money on paper and ink, and then the frame, which is the most expensive part.
Yeah, we're quite ambitious with this exhibition and what we want to achieve with it. But what about people who, you know, they don't have much disposable income to put something together? Would you encourage people to just do this on a very small scale, to print the work, even if it's just in the local village hall?
It's harder undoubtedly because if you, most people don't have a printer at home or a really, really good printer. And if you do, it's different. That's obviously, you've already made that commitment. But if you still like to do something in a real space as opposed to the virtual world, then there's no alternative to making a print. Fortunately, there's some really, really good commercial printers, both online and in your local town or city, who can help, and they can make very good prints. And especially if you meet face to face, I think it's easier to express what you want and so on. And it can be painful, just as printing at home can. You know, you're bound to have a few failures. But if you can get through that, you don't have to print really big to make a valuable print. I think Michael Kenner's prints are all like 7 inches square or something. You know, it's not that they have to be big, as long as they're nicely framed. They don't have to be expensive frames, so that you feel like you're making a commitment. So yeah, I don't see why. It's available to most people if they have a camera.
Our exhibition, it's only local woodland within the national park. Something that I've been very passionate about over the past 6 years. And I guess I would imagine there's a lot of crossover in terms of what we want to achieve with the exhibition, in terms of the messages that we want to portray, what we want to celebrate. For me personally, it's had such a profoundly positive effect on my well-being, and I want to celebrate that. Let people see the end result printed in a way that I want it to be viewed, and see if people can kind of get a sense of you know, how precious these places are, a sense of sanctuary. In fact, our exhibition is called, can we say?
A Woodland Sanctuary.
A Woodland Sanctuary, yeah. But from your point of view, what do you also get that sense of therapy when out in the local woods now? Is this going to be a strong message in the exhibition?
It is. I think hopefully that will come through. But you know, one thing I always feel is that you can't dictate how anybody responds to going to a show. And one of the exciting things about doing anything in the arts is that it's not propaganda. It's not a closed book. You create what from as deep within you as you can, and you put it out there, and then people find their own message and their own narrative. The trees feel like home. You know, they're like they're sheltering, but they can also represent the inner world of the imagination in a way that the open landscape can't often. There's some incredibly spectacular things in the open landscape, but when you photograph trees, it's not really about any one tree. It's much more perhaps the inner world of the imagination. So, you know, we're on this one spot here surrounded by trees of lots of different ages, but I mean, it's funny how I've actually never been in this particular spot before, and it's an afternoon, fairly undistinguished. It's just cloudy, overcast. But I mean, looking around me, I'm seeing these trees which all seem to have their own sort of story to tell. Everyone is unique, different. There's many different species. I mean, immediately you can see, I mean, we're so lucky in the UK, I think, in that respect.
Yes, yeah.
And the feeling of enclosure, while a lot of the time that's sheltering, there is also there's a moment when it can feel like slightly menacing as well. And in a way, the emotional range of the woods is very life affirming, I suppose. I can't think of the right phrase, but it makes me feel very alive. And it doesn't matter what day, it could be pouring with rain, or the wind can be blowing, it'll be still as anything, and there's a different resonance to it. And with all these different surfaces and colours, you could never get bored in the wood.
Do you want to talk about a handful of the themes that we've chosen? Because I think there's so many different ways to interpret woodland, and you know, which can be very positive, can be quite negative, can be quite sort of foreboding places. We think of trees as observers of time, and also places where they've bullied other trees to succeed. But also where nature's taken over again, and where we sort of see purposeless walls and abandoned buildings, or we have the relaxing atmosphere of a babbling beck running through and that sound echoing through the canopy. So yeah, do you want to talk about some of the themes and some of the reasons why we're doing those?
Well, that's interesting, Simon, because you just mentioned several of the themes there. So that's really good. And actually, I think the idea is that when you, for me, what's happened is that as I look back on my woodland pictures from the last few years, they seem to naturally fall into different areas. And so in a way, the idea of picking the themes, I think what it helps us to do is to create structure for the exhibition, and to give a focus and an artistic structure, but it's also talking points. But I think that for us, we are looking for that focus and that way of highlighting specific strands that actually appear naturally in our work. I think really, if you're trying to boil it down in one sentence, it's about creating a bit of artistic structure that also then helps to highlight these specific aspects, some of which are photographic, some of which are ecological, some of which are personal and experiential, and some of which are historic, and a mix of those things, which I think the woodland is in a way, a kind of, it's such a vital microcosm of the Earth's landscape, and actually in a landscape scale like the North York Moors, there's enough variety to reflect many of those themes.
Yeah, so essentially it's a way to celebrate all the different facets, all the different flavours of woodland, because we see a lot of images online which tend to be quite moody and sombre and spooky. But I think we both are people that enjoy taking a whole variety of different, you just as much as me will love a misty or a foggy woodland, but there's so many different other aspects to enjoy and celebrate and share with others.
Yeah, and I think that's, if you're just thinking of the misty woodland, for example, very simply, mist simplifies. So, yes. And because it's a complex landscape, that's a big assistance for us. But there's all sorts of other ways of solving those, the problems of form. At the same time, actually, it's a good point. One of our themes is, I think we're calling it chaos theory.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
and that too is a kind of, for me, a fascinating aspect of woodland, coming to terms with the reality of woodland, which is it's incredibly chaotic, and yet still finding ways of visually solving the puzzle, or trying to. Solving is perhaps too strong a term, but where you're tackling lots of different problems of form and texture and colour and light, to make something that still has a quality, has a message or an idea that hangs together, and that's a great challenge. Yeah. And so it's sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but I think it's an important one.
Yeah, well, it's embracing that complexity, enjoying that complexity, not shying away from that chaos. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think that there's a very understandable tendency in photography and landscape photography to sort of stress the importance of simplicity, and simplicity is powerful, but complexity is the landscape.
Yes.
And it's especially true of the woodland landscape.
Yeah. So is there anything that you'd personally like to get out of this process of having this exhibition? But at the same time, is there anything that you hope that the community, the visitors of the exhibition, what they would get out of it?
I just love the idea of seeing some woodland pictures on the wall together. One of the things that is frustrating is that for me is I spend such a lot of my time in the woods, and I hardly ever get to exhibit any of the work. In the gallery we have in Northallerton, I've got one or two pictures of woodland up, but that's not, in a way, the trouble is that they're not of place that's obviously recognisable. They're of trees and atmosphere, and they're more pictures of my inner world than they are of the landscape in a way. But they're also of the reality that I see in front of me. So this exhibition is a great excuse to print and make some really good sized prints and show them with you. And I think that because I'm just as excited to see your pictures in print. I got told a few years ago that by a fellow landscape photographer that I was irrelevant. Of
Harsh.
course it was harsh. It might have been true, but I guess it did make me think, well, why do you do this? And, it honestly isn't just to put food on the table. I feel that, if you're a working artist, you also have a role to play in society, to reflect on where society is. And there's so many different ways of doing it. Some photographers will go out and photograph environmental destruction and degradation, which is, very sincere, very important documentary work. But from my own point of view, I've focused most of my work throughout my career on making positive images of nature. And I think that generally that inspires people to feel connected to it, to feel that it's precious and valuable and worth preserving. Part of this for me is the pleasure of being able to communicate pictures of our local trees, is that it's a reminder that we can get photographic artistic joy from our back doorstep, and that's a very important message to get across, I think.
But you say about wanting to create positive images to inspire, but at the same time we also have a chapter in the exhibition called Dark Matter, which really is there to showcase some of the more destructive elements and melancholic and sad to see things that we sometimes come across in woodland.
Correct. Yeah. Oh, I think that's important because the show, we want it, I think, to be a holistic experience. And there are times when when you're wandering around, you come across clear cut that looks absolutely devastating, or sometimes we see, as in one of your most famous photographs, the local native trees being crowded out by these non-natives, which are essentially harvest trees. This is not just about what we're looking at, but looking back inside as well. And I think landscape photography, at its best, offers both the look of the real world, the geography, and the inner world of the photographer, and the metaphoric possibilities that are out there as you look at the forms of nature. There's no more expressive environment than woodland in that respect.
No. So I think both of us, we're very solitary in our pursuit in photography. We enjoy time on our own, for different reasons, for creative purposes, and so we can concentrate on the practice of photography, but also for the therapeutic benefits. And I, have these, I just see it all as a gift, and these kind of gifted moments in time. I see it as a privilege when it's just you, the trees, the woodland. You feel as if you're just in the middle of nowhere, and there's that magical moment where it all comes together. There's harmony, and you press the shutter, and you feel as if you've got something which is representative of what woodland means to you and is expressive. However, the exhibition is collaborative, and we're both working together on it, which is quite interesting. So how do you feel about that?
Oh, I think it's incredibly cool, actually. I really do. There's a good reason for that. I completely agree with what you were saying about the solitary nature of being with the trees, and of course for me, I would say that generally landscape photography is very therapeutic, and you were looking outside, so especially if your inner voices have been ganging up on you, which they do sometimes, especially think of lockdown, a lot of people that struggle with inner health, let's say, and photography is great in that way. It forces you to engage with the outside world, and I think at its best when you're on your own in nature, and the woods make you feel close to nature. Your sense of self actually, it both weirdly it becomes much more centered, but also it drops away. You feel part of life. You feel connected in a way, well, with the trees and the rocks and the undergrowth and everything around you, and you don't, that sense of separation, which is probably difficult to avoid as a human being most of the time. You do feel separate from nature, it goes, and it's one of the great privileges of being a photographer. I think the collaboration to get to that point is fantastic from my point of view, because actually doing an exhibition is a lot of pressure, and if you're doing it on your own, you don't necessarily have a sounding board. In a way, I guess I would say that putting on a show, on an exhibition, is much more like doing a gig, doing a performance with friends who are musicians, or doing a stage show. Collaboration makes it richer, makes it more powerful, and it's a lot more fun. So I think that's the aspect of it that I'm really looking forward to. The fact that it's shared, and I know I'm actually really just looking forward to seeing your pictures in print as well. So
yeah, it's very kind. Yeah, slightly nervous about seeing them against your prints.
Rubbish.
Yeah, but what you're saying about it's we're sharing the experience, and there's a lot of value in that. But then it's the end result of sharing it with other people, and we get to relive the experience. We get to relive the moments that we've enjoyed where we made those images, but also all the experience. I get a huge amount of pleasure from all the experiences that are wrapped up in those images, because we're working in local woodlands. We've scouted these places, we've invested huge amounts of time in them over years, and if we look back and think of everything that's happened in that time, what we've seen, what we've experienced, how the woodland has changed, how certain trees have fallen and some woodlands have disappeared entirely. And I think recalling those experiences while looking at the print on the wall and seeing how other people react to that, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, but having some discussions around it, there's a huge amount of satisfaction, both personal fulfillment, but hopefully fulfillment for the viewer as well.
Yeah, there may not be that personal contact, because after all, perhaps photography's biggest weakness, or like any visual art, is that it's only visual. So we go through the wood, you have the smells and the sights, the temperature, the wind, the touch. It does still provoke the imagination, and it's actually the interaction with the imagination that matters the most. I can look back at pictures now that I shot 40 years ago, and any memory I have of the moment it's constructed. It's not really that real any longer, but I still value the pictures because they represent turning points in an artistic journey for me, or they've held, or maybe they're so good they've actually really held up over the course of time, and think, wow, that's good, because something happened in that translation of the literal world, which is what a photograph is most of the time, that really worked, and you're never in full control of it as a photographer. I think that's one of the great things about photography, is the mystery of it. You might seem very transactional in some ways because it's a machine, the camera and everything, but photography is always a translation, it's always an interpretation, and what really you hope for is a picture that's good enough that it will have its own afterlife, if you like.
I hope you enjoyed that little taster, but I'll certainly try and make some more targeted videos about the exhibition and the work that we're doing around it, both before and after the event. Now, the official open day is Saturday the 16th of July, and it takes place at the Inspired By Gallery, which is at the Moors National Park Centre in Danby, here in North Yorkshire. It runs until Saturday the 11th of September, and during that time there's going to be various activities and appearances, all of which I'll keep you up to date with. There are going to be some ticketed events such as the open evening and some of the guided tours, but I'll let you know as soon as they're available through the gallery. Now, I appreciate not everybody's going to be able to attend this exhibition, but I will do my very best to create some content and share some of the experiences along the way. But for now, please sign up to my newsletter and follow me on other platforms to stay up to date, or for access to some exclusives, but also to support this channel and some of my creative projects, then please consider becoming a patron. Your support is hugely appreciated. But thank you very much for watching this episode, and I hope to see you back out in the woods very soon.